I paid for everything, flights, a luxury resort, the whole trip. The night before, my mother smiled. "Clara, stay home and watch your sister's kids," she said. My sister smirked. "You're better off behind the scenes anyway." I just smiled. They had no idea. The next morning, my mother screamed at the airport. Clara Evans stood by the window, gazing at the autumn sunset bathing the garden after a long day at the accounting firm. Her thoughts drifted back to the family vacation plans. She remained labeled as Reliable Clara, a nickname she carried since childhood. "Clara, where's tomorrow's schedule? Clara, help me with these tax forms. Clara, make that doctor's appointment for Mom." No matter how trivial, the family naturally turned to her. She always smiled quietly and accommodated their endless requests. Clara, who majored in accounting at Ohio State University, was quickly hired by a prominent local accounting firm. She was diligent, meticulous, and extremely competent. While many of her peers flew off to big cities, Clara chose to stay local for her mother and sister. Clara has her feet on the ground, her mother Margaret often boasted to neighbors. But hidden behind those words was the implication. That's why she can sacrifice her life for the family. Margaret, a retired high school teacher, valued her reputation in the community above all else. Having lost her husband early, she raised her 2 daughters strictly, yet her love was always conditional. Serving the family, Clara's sister Sophie worked at a local real estate company. She had married as a teenager and was raising her 9-year-old daughter, Lily, alone. Sophie was charming, sociable, and always put her own desires first. "Clara, could you watch Lily this weekend? I have an important meeting with a client." Sophie's calls came at least twice a week. Clara never refused. She truly loved her niece. Lily, like Clara, was a quiet, thoughtful child. That evening, Clara was invited to her mother's house. A pot roast, prepared by Margaret, sat on the dining table. "Clara, I've been thinking," Margaret began while eating. "We should spend more time together as a family. I'm getting older, and who knows how much longer we'll have together." Clara set down her chopsticks and thought deeply. Indeed, family time was important, but their family time always followed the same pattern, Clara planning everything, preparing everything, and cleaning up afterward. "Yes, Mom," Clara answered slowly. "Actually, I've been thinking too. How about we all go to Florida for the winter holiday?" "Florida?" Margaret's eyes lit up. "Wonderful!" "But we can't afford that." "My pension, don't worry," Clara said gently. "I'll pay for it. Everything. I'll cover all the expenses, flights, hotel, everything." When her mother's face brightened, Clara felt a small warmth in her chest. That evening, she contacted Sophie to share the travel plans. Sophie was thrilled. "Really? You're paying for everything, Clara? You're the best sister ever." Over the next few weeks, Clara worked on the travel arrangements between her work hours. She booked a luxury resort in Santa Rosa Beach, Florida, and first-class round-trip tickets. She spent her savings generously, hoping this would be an opportunity to deepen family bonds. However, as the planning progressed, subtle changes began to appear. One day, when Clara stopped by her mother's house, Margaret and Sophie were sitting on the sofa, laughing while looking at travel magazines. "Oh, Clara." Margaret noticed her. "Sophie and I were just discussing what swimsuits to buy. Would you like me to join you?" Clara suggested. But the two exchanged glances. "Oh, but we're planning to go tomorrow," Sophie said. "You're busy, aren't you?" "We don't want to impose." Similar situations continued. Margaret and Sophie decided on the menu at the restaurant Clara had reserved without consulting her. They planned the beach activity schedule without asking for her opinion. The night before departure, Clara visited her family home for final confirmations. In the living room, Margaret and Sophie were packing their last items into suitcases. Lily was watching from the top of the stairs, her chest swelling with excitement. "Everything's on track," Clara said with a smile. "The taxi will pick us up at 7 tomorrow morning. We'll check in at the airport." "Oh, by the way," Margaret suddenly said, as if remembering something, "Clara, you're staying home to look after Lily, right?" Clara was speechless. "What?" Someone has to look after Lily, don't they? Sophie said, matter-of-factly. Let's make this an adults-only vacation. Lily is still young, and you're so good at being behind the scenes. Clara looked at Lily at the top of the stairs. The girl's eyes were clouded with sadness. She had heard everything. Clara took a deep breath and smiled quietly. I understand, she said. Don't worry, I'll take care of everything. Her mother and sister smiled with relief. The next morning, under a clear blue sky, Clara stepped out of the taxi that had stopped in front of her mother's house at exactly 7. She was dressed in a perfectly arranged suit, wearing her usual gentle smile. Good morning, she greeted Margaret and Sophie, who were waiting at the entrance. They were already dressed in flashy travel clothes, holding large suitcases. Oh, Clara, Margaret said with surprise. Why are you dressed like that? I thought formal attire would be appropriate for dropping you off. Clara shrugged. Come on, let's load the luggage. We don't want to be late. Margaret and Sophie nodded with relief and got into the taxi. Clara quietly said something to the driver, then slid into the back seat. Did Lily go to school? Sophie asked. Don't worry, I've taken care of everything, Clara smiled. During the journey, Margaret and Sophie excitedly discussed their travel plans. The tropical sun, white sandy beaches, and a luxury spa. Margaret sighed. Thank you, Clara. You're such a good daughter. Clara just nodded silently. As the taxi approached the airport, a mix of emotions swirled inside her. Anger, sadness, and a strange sense of liberation. Feelings she had suppressed for years were finally surfacing. Please drop us here, Clara told the driver, and the taxi stopped in front of the departure lobby. She helped unload Margaret and Sophie's luggage and began walking with them to see them off. I'll buy you souvenirs, Margaret said. Is there anything you want? No, nothing, Clara answered quietly. Have a good time, both of you. She watched them pass through the automatic doors and head toward the check-in counter. After waving slightly, she began walking toward another taxi. Margaret and Sophie approached the check-in counter confidently. Behind the counter, a young female staff member in a blue uniform waited with a gentle smile. Good morning, the staff greeted. May I have your boarding details? Evans and Watson, Margaret said proudly. We're flying to Florida. The staff checked their IDs and began typing on the computer keyboard. However, Margaret started to feel uneasy as she watched the staff's expression become increasingly confused. Is there a problem? I'm sorry, the staff answered, carefully choosing her words. I can't seem to find your reservation. What? Margaret's voice rose. That's impossible. Margaret Evans and Sophie Watson. My daughter paid for everything. The staff typed on the keyboard again and peered at the screen. It appears that a reservation under your names did exist, she continued, carefully choosing her words, but it seems to have been canceled last night. Canceled? Sophie interrupted. That's ridiculous. My sister made the reservation. Let me check again. The staff continued searching. Evans, found it. There are reservations under the names Clara Evans and Lily Watson on the same flight. First-class reservations. What? Margaret's scream echoed through the airport lobby, loud enough to make surrounding travelers turn around. There must be some mistake, Sophie persisted. Lily Watson is my daughter, but she's not here right now. She should be at school. The staff checked another screen and looked even more perplexed. I'm sorry, but Miss Evans and Miss Watson have already completed their check-in at another gate. Check-in? Margaret repeated with disbelief. She took out her smartphone with shaking hands and dialed Clara's number, but the call was only forwarded to voicemail. Clara, what are you doing? Call me back immediately, Margaret yelled at the voicemail. Sophie was also trying to contact Lily's school on her phone. Teacher, is Lily Watson at school today? She's not? What do you mean? She wasn't supposed to be absent. Margaret approached the staff again. This is fraud. We'll report this to the police. Please calm down, the staff responded coolly. I have a message for you from Miss Evans. The staff took out a small envelope and handed it to Margaret. With trembling hands, Margaret opened the envelope and took out the note inside. It was written in Clara's neat handwriting. "Sorry for always taking advantage of me. This time, Lily and I will enjoy ourselves." The color drained from Margaret's face. She handed the note to Sophie. When Sophie finished reading it, tears were welling in her eyes. "My daughter, with Clara?" She was at a loss for words. Just then, an airport announcement echoed, "This is the final boarding call for Flight 505 to Florida. All passengers who have not yet boarded, please come to Gate 23 immediately." Margaret collapsed to the floor as if her knees had given way, covering her face with her hands. A long, painful cry escaped her lips as people around them turned with concern. Sophie placed a hand on her mother's shoulder. She herself was dazed and trembling with shock. "How could this happen?" Margaret mumbled. That Clara would do something like this. Under the bright light streaming from the airport ceiling, the two women were beginning to understand what they had done. "It feels like we're flying above the clouds." Lily's excited voice pleasantly broke the stillness of the first-class cabin. In her spacious window seat, the little girl was mesmerized by the sea of clouds. Clara smiled and gently stroked her niece's black hair. "Yes, it's just like heaven, isn't it?" That meant more than a metaphor for Clara. This moment was liberation from years of family pressure. For the first time in her life, she was spending her money for herself and for someone she truly loved. A flight attendant brought a tray with warm croissants and orange juice. "How are you feeling?" she smiled at Lily. "Fantastic," Lily happily replied, but her expression clouded slightly. "Won't Mom and Grandma be angry that we came without them?" Clara took a deep breath and looked directly into her niece's eyes. "Lily, sometimes adults need to step back and think. Your mom and grandma forgot that I'm just as important as you are. But isn't this like punishment?" Clara smiled. Lily always saw through things beyond her years. "It's more of a lesson than a punishment, a lesson about valuing people who are important to you," Clara explained gently. "Don't worry, we'll have a wonderful time and bring back nice souvenirs." Lily thought for a moment and then nodded. "Mom always says, Aunt Clara is so understanding, but that's not really a good thing, is it?" A small pain shot through Clara's chest. Even a 9-year-old could understand what her own mother and sister couldn't. Being understanding is wonderful, but when it's taken for granted, it stops being love, she said quietly. The plane began its descent into Florida's blue sky. The view from the window was of emerald green sea, white sandy beaches, and lush palm trees. Lily's eyes shone with excitement. "Look! The ocean!" A real ocean. Clara made a silent promise to herself, a promise to make this a special trip for this child. Hours later, Clara and Lily had checked into the luxury resort they had reserved. "Welcome, Miss Evans and Miss Watson." The front desk staff warmly greeted them. "We've prepared an ocean view suite for you." As soon as they entered the room, Lily ran out to the large balcony. "Auntie, look! You can see the ocean." Her voice was filled with pure joy. Clara set down the suitcases and took a slow, deep breath. Her face showed a genuinely relaxed expression for the first time in a long while. She felt the tension release from her shoulders, and her usual stress melt away. "After we unpack, shall we go to the beach?" Clara suggested, and Lily jumped with joy. An hour later, they were stepping onto the white sandy beach. Lily shouted with delight at her first touch of ocean waves. She ran into the waves without hesitation, and Clara followed. The salt water touched their skin, bringing a pleasant sense of liberation. "Auntie, over here!" Lily waved from among the waves. Clara swam toward her niece, laughing, surrendering to the waves, and feeling the sun's warmth. She thought, "When was the last time I laughed this freely?" "You look so beautiful when you laugh, Auntie," Lily suddenly said while playing in the waves. "You always have a serious face when you're with Mom, but today you've been smiling all day." Clara's chest warmed. She pulled her niece close and kissed her wet hair. "Being with you naturally makes me smile." That evening, they were dining at the resort's restaurant. Clara had specially reserved an ocean view table for Lily. As the sunset painted the sea golden, Lily's eyes sparkled as she tasted a shrimp cocktail for the first time. "Auntie," Lily asked with a serious expression, "why didn't Mom and Grandma come with you?" Clara set down her wineglass and carefully chose her words. "They wanted me to stay home, but I wanted to travel with you. But I was supposed to be in school." "Yes, that's why I specially asked your teacher for permission as an educational trip," Clara smiled. "Tomorrow, we're going to the aquarium to learn about marine creatures." Lily's face brightened. "Really? Can we see dolphins too?" "Of course. And we'll go shopping too. We need to choose souvenirs for Mom and Grandma." Lily pondered for a moment. "Do you think they miss us?" Clara nodded quietly. "I'm sure they do. But that's an important lesson too." Meanwhile, back in Ohio, Margaret and Sophie were standing in front of Clara's apartment, having come directly from the airport by taxi. They were still in their flashy travel clothes. "She won't be here," Sophie sighed. "She's in Florida with my daughter right now." Margaret irritably pushed the doorbell. "But there might be some clue to understand why she choked on her words. She wanted to say a betrayal, but the words seemed to bounce back at her. As expected, there was no response. They convinced the apartment manager to open the door for them, claiming it was an emergency. Stepping into Clara's apartment, they were enveloped in silence. The neatly arranged room bore Clara's presence strongly: simple, functional furniture, softly colored walls, and numerous books on the shelves. Sophie's eyes were drawn to a photo frame in the living room. It displayed pictures of her daughter, Lily playing soccer, Lily at a birthday party, and Lily with Clara at the aquarium. She realized for the first time she had been absent from many of these moments. "She really loves Lily," Sophie said in a small voice. Margaret silently walked to the back of the apartment. She opened the door to Clara's study and stopped. An entire wall was carefully decorated with Lily's drawings and crafts, birthday cards, Christmas cards, and handmade gifts labeled to Aunt Clara. "Oh my." Margaret's voice trembled. Sophie followed her mother into the study. Her eyes caught an open ledger on the desk. There was an entry for Lily's college fund with evidence of monthly contributions. Seeing the amount, Sophie gasped. It far exceeded her monthly income. "She's been saving for Lily," Sophie's voice was shaking, "and I didn't even think about my own daughter's future." Margaret sat down in a chair, covering her face with trembling hands. "What have we been doing, Mom?" Sophie placed a hand on her mother's shoulder. "We've been taking her for granted. I've treated my own sister, unable to continue." Sophie collapsed to the floor and broke down crying. Years of suppressed emotions had finally broken through. Margaret embraced her daughter, also in tears. The morning in Florida began with a vibrancy not found in Ohio. Now on their third day, Clara and Lily had completely adapted to the tropical lifestyle. After having breakfast via room service, Clara invited Lily to head to the beach. Today's goal was to build a sand castle. During the night, Lily had borrowed a book from the library and learned how to make surprisingly complex sand castles. They settled on the beach with buckets, small shovels, and various molds. "The tower goes here, and the moat should go around this area." Lily gave instructions with childlike seriousness. Clara smiled and obeyed. She packed the sand, carried water, and shaped towers according to her niece's directions. By the time the sun rose overhead, it had become a magnificent sand castle. Passers-by on the beach stopped to express their admiration. "That's amazing!" Clara wiped the sweat from her forehead with her sandy hands. "You could become an architect." Lily laughed proudly. Then suddenly, as if having just thought of it, she said, "Shall we choose souvenirs for Mom and Grandma today?" Clara was a bit surprised. "Yes, of course. Do you have something in mind?" Lily sat on the sand, stretching her small feet toward the shoreline. "I want to draw pictures for Mom and for Grandma, too." "That's lovely." Clara sat next to her niece. "What kind of pictures?" "Of all of us, Mom, Grandma, you and me, everyone smiling," Lily answered with a serious expression. "Because we're family. A warmth spread through Clara's chest. In any situation, Lily valued family bonds. It reminded Clara of something she herself had almost forgotten. "And I'll write letters too," Lily continued. "Will you help me?" "Of course," Clara answered gently. "And we'll choose real souvenirs too. Shall we go to the small town market this afternoon?" Lily was delighted. They left their sandcastle behind and returned to the resort to shower and change. In the afternoon, Clara rented a car and took Lily to a small local town. There was a market there that few tourists knew about. Small shops extended into back alleys, selling local crafts and antiques. Clara remembered things her mother and sister had casually mentioned wanting. Margaret had noticed a Victorian antique brooch, and Sophie had been looking for a first edition book by a certain author. Both had said someday, but never actually bought them. Clara entered an antique shop at the back of the market. "Hello," she greeted the owner. "I'm looking for a Victorian brooch." Hours later, Clara and Lily had accomplished their respective missions. Clara had found the brooch for Margaret and the first edition book for Sophie, and Lily had drawn pictures and written heartfelt letters for both of them. During dinner at the resort restaurant, Lily asked Clara, "Auntie, why is Mom always so busy?" Clara set down her fork and carefully chose her words. "Your mom is trying desperately to carve her own path. Real estate work is demanding, but does she love me?" Lily's eyes showed anxiety. "Of course," Clara answered immediately. "Mom loves you from the bottom of her heart. It's just that sometimes adults lose sight of what's important." Lily thought for a while. "Mom and Grandma are always busy with work and their own things more than with me. But Aunt Clara always listens to me." Clara felt a tightness in her chest. She reached across the table and held Lily's small hand. "You are very special to me, Lily, one of the most important people in my life." Tears welled in Lily's eyes. "I love you too, Auntie." Clara stood up, walked to Lily's seat, and embraced her as people around them cast warm glances at the scene. The two held each other for a long time. On the morning of the fourth day, Clara and Lily were making final preparations. They visited the resort's business center to ship a special package home. The box contained letters, drawings, and heartfelt souvenirs. Lily's drawing showed the whole family smiling and holding hands, with "To my beloved family" written on it. Her letter said in childish handwriting, "Auntie is my hero. I would be happy if Mom and Grandma valued me an auntie." Clara added her own letter. It was short but heartfelt. "I am also a member of the family. Please don't forget that. With love, Clara." After addressing the package, Clara whispered quietly, "I hope this becomes the final lesson." 2 days later, a delivery person brought the package to the Evans family doorstep in Ohio. Margaret and Sophie had been continuously waiting for contact from Clara. They had spent sleepless nights reflecting on their actions and thinking about how to be forgiven. "It's from Clara." Margaret picked up the package and opened it with trembling hands. The first thing they saw was Lily's drawing, everyone in the family holding hands and smiling. The purity and innocence of it brought tears to Margaret's eyes. Next, Lily's letter. The words "Auntie is my hero" pierced both their hearts. And finally, Clara's short letter, "I am also a member of the family." Though just one line, those words sank deep into Margaret and Sophie's hearts. They took out the souvenirs from the package, the Victorian brooch Margaret had long wanted, and the first edition book Sophie had been searching for. She remembered, Sophie whispered, holding the book, "things we just casually mentioned. We thought she was invisible," Margaret said quietly, "but in fact, we were the ones not seeing her." Sophie clutched the book to her chest. "How much have we been missing?" The two sat shoulder to shoulder on the guest room sofa, quietly crying. For the first time, they were beginning to understand the weight of their actions and the true meaning of family. When they return, Margaret said with determination, "We'll change everything." Sophie squeezed her mother's hand and nodded silently. A week later, at Ohio International Airport, Margaret and Sophie were waiting restlessly in the arrival lobby. The announcement that the flight from Florida had landed heightened their tension. "They're coming out," Sophie pointed to the arrival gate. Among the wave of people, Clara appeared. She was holding Lily's hand, walking with a peaceful expression. Her tan skin told of their days in the tropics. Margaret rushed to them without hesitation. Clara, her voice was trembling. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Clara gazed quietly at her mother. There was no anger in her eyes, only a gentle determination. Sophie also approached, saying tearfully, "We didn't realize how much we depended on you, taking your life for granted." Lily stepped between them and hugged her mother. "Mom, it was so much fun. I went to the beach with Aunt Clara and we chose presents for Grandma and Mom." "Yes, we received them," Margaret smiled. "Thank you for the wonderful presents." During the car ride home, the changes that had occurred over the past week gradually became apparent. Margaret asked if there was a spare room in Clara's apartment, saying, "I want to spend more time with you too." Sophie showed Lily's school event schedule, promising, "I will never miss these from now on." Over the next few weeks, family relationships slowly mended. Margaret began visiting Clara's apartment twice a week, sometimes bringing home cooked meals. But this time, instead of taking over the kitchen saying, "You're busy," she worked alongside Clara. Sophie changed too. She cherished the time after Lily returned from school and created family time on weekends, including Clara. The biggest change was that Clara's opinions were now respected in family conversations. When the topic of where to go for the next vacation came up, Margaret sought Clara's opinion first. "Let's discuss it together," Clara answered. Her expression showed a confidence that hadn't been there before. 3 months later, Sophie failed to secure a big real estate contract, jeopardizing her position at the company. Previously, she would have immediately sought Clara's help, but this time was different. She faced the problem alone and tried to find a solution on her own. "Need help?" Clara asked with concern. "No, I'll try to handle this myself," Sophie answered with determination. "As you've always taught me, solve your own problems yourself." At Christmas, the family gathered again at Margaret's house. Homemade dishes lined the table, and a gentle fire burned in the fireplace. "Let's make a toast," Margaret raised her glass. "To think that at my age I still have things to learn, what family means, what love means." "Thank you for that lesson, Clara." Sophie also raised her glass with a smile. "I overcame the crisis at work. I learned the importance of solving problems on my own." "It's thanks to you, sis." Lily sat next to Clara, reaching out her small hand to hold hers. They exchanged a secret smile. "We'll travel together again," Clara promised Lily. "But next time we'll all go together." Outside the window, snow had begun to fall quietly. In the room, lit by warm light, the family had finally regained their true bond.